You know, I remember my first op in the 506 after I finished their training regiment. It wasn't anything too eventful in my opinion. We did a lot of walking and maneuvering, went through some minefields, killed some infantry, and overall it was okay. Yet, I will always remember that debrief, because at the end of going through every single little detail on how squads maneuvered and whatnot at the platoon level, the Zeus asked everyone a simple question. Did everyone have fun? And then the whole channel proceeded to be filled with a bunch of people saying hoo-ah, and literally, I almost took my headset off because almost everyone went up and said that, and everyone had a good laugh about it afterwards. And that memory has still stuck with me this entire time. So, here's the question that I am going to spend a lot of time tackling over various videos. What makes a good Zeus? Now, right off the bat, I have to change that question, and let me explain why. Zeusing is just an interface that you use to deliver a mission. However, you don't just start with a Zeus file and work with it. Normally you pre-build everything in a mission file and then add the Zeus module on top of it to make it easier for you to deliver the mission as it progresses, because that has advantages and disadvantages of just using a simple mission file on its own. However, regardless of if you purely use a mission file or you make a mission file and add a Zeusing module to it, these questions kind of intertwine with themselves. Generally, if you're a good mission maker, you'll also be a good Zeus, and if you're a bad Zeus, you'll also be a bad mission maker, because the principles that dictate good Zeusing and good mission making are actually pretty much the same. So, the question we're going to tackle is, what makes a good mission? That keeps it broad enough to include Zeusing, as well as including the fact that some people just prefer missions without Zeusing, period. So, what makes a good mission? This is also just, in general, a very difficult question, and here's why. Arma in itself is a sandbox game. When you load up any terrain, you can fly around it in the Eden editor. It's all blank, and you put every single thing in that you want, and you can even take things away, similar to any other sandbox game, such as Minecraft or Gary's mod, just to name two. Because of this, there are various different player bases out there that have their own communities that like to play Arma a certain way, and each one of these player bases has their very own tastes and preferences that they have developed based off of people that make missions for them, experimenting with various different settings, not just with vanilla, but with ace settings, for example. You know, there's 100 different ways to configure those, and other mods. You can be an RHS or a cup community, you can be a more vanilla, or you could be an IFA World War II community. The possibilities are in the thousands to tens of thousands of what you can do with this game. So, if we were to attempt to answer the question, what makes a good mission maker, we would have to keep things broad enough to encompass every single community, every single possibility, which is a pretty daunting task. However, after spending 10 or so months debating the question, and writing 9 goddamn scripts, I've boiled the answer down to about 5 different statements, what I'm going to call golden rules, that, in my opinion, shouldn't be followed exactly to the letter, because there's always exceptions to everything. Arma's a sandbox after all, but should always be referenced, in my opinion, when you're building a mission. So, without further ado, let's get into it. What is the top #1 golden rule that every mission maker should follow? Well, let's think about it logically for a second. Why do players come and play Arma 3 in comparison to other games that they could pick up that are much more recent out on the market right now? When I ask people these questions, most fall in the lines of they just want to have fun. Arma 3, despite being about 7 years old right now, is still one of the only games where you can do what you can do with Arma compared to any other game on the market. And it's thanks to these mission makers and Zeuses that we have across various different communities that are able to execute these experiences so the players keep coming back. So, the #1 golden rule for mission making has to follow on that ideology. So it's as simple as this. Top rule is players have to have fun. Now, you're probably face-palming like me, thinking, yeah, of course, that's obvious as hell, right? But here's the issue with Arma 3 that I've discovered over the past 4 years. Common sense is seldom common in any community you play in, but I'm not going to insult anyone's intelligence and define why a player base should have fun. That should be common knowledge. However, I do need to explain the why. And it's just a matter of if players aren't having fun, they're going to leave. I've seen it in every community I have come across where people make silly decisions, usually at the higher level, and it causes a lot of unrest on the bottom, and then, people just migrate to different places as they search for an experience of where they want to play. So, this video is going to talk about how to mitigate something like that, how to perceive fun for, a group of various different players, and this is where this question actually starts to get very, very complex. Fun is in the eyes of the beholder. Someone may like some very, very casual style operations where they just get to walk around and pew-pew their guns. Some might want a realistic realism military experience that they can only get in certain places. This is the backbone of why we have so many different communities out there that cater to different needs, from Star Sim units to Halo Op Tray units, Realism World War II, Big Red 1 units, you name it. There is an experience out there for everyone because everyone wants to get a different experience out of their sandbox game. By proxy, this also means good Zeusing and good mission making is also subjective to the same people that have their own tastes and preferences on what they define fun is. So, as a Zeus/mission maker, you have to cater to as many of these people as possible without falling into various different pitfalls that I've seen a lot of Zeuses, including myself, get into. In my opinion, the best way to gauge this is to not start anywhere by Zeusing or making missions or whatever for any particular community. If you find a place you want to make missions for or whatnot, you first need to play a few ops on the ground, see how the players interact with certain scenarios. What if they're given something easy, do they like that? Do they complain that it needs to be harder? What if they're given something that's harder? After that, do they like it, or do they then complain that it's too hard? Where's that middle ground that, any mission maker or Zeus is trying to find to make it better for their players? And then even after you start Zeusing or mission making for a community, you still need to keep playing on the ground, because that is your best way to gauge how the community as a whole is doing in scenarios, and nothing's better than giving you ideas or showing off how good a player base is than playing on the ground with them and being a part of their machine that, goes in and completes an operation. So that in itself will let you establish a baseline to, make sure your players have fun when you create missions for them. But how do you go on top of that? What if you are getting a fresh group of players together and you don't have a way to, play missions with them beforehand, and you're just kind of going in there and figuring out things as you go? The answer to this is very simple, but it's going to take a lot to explain. You are going to physically communicate with your players and ask them what they want to play. And then on top of that, after your operation is complete, you should take feedback. Now again, you're probably face-palming and thinking, yeah, that's common sense, but I've already said this, common sense in Arma 3 is seldom common. And throughout my past 4 years, I've actually been to a lot of places where mission makers don't take any feedback. Hell, admittedly, I watched the biggest Zeus at the time, way back when, actually fall because he stopped taking feedback. So, in my opinion, there are 3 different ways that you can take feedback after an operation. And each one has some various degrees of success, but I cannot stress this enough, guys. Take feedback after your operations. It lets you directly understand someone's point of view in an operation, saying, hey, I like this about the op, I dislike this about the op. And if you get so many people saying that in a community after your operation, then that'll help you gauge where they like to have fun and where they don't like to have fun. Maybe the players didn't like how difficult something was, or they didn't like a certain concept that you tried to do in your operation. All you gotta do is just take that feedback into account so you can make that next operation better, because if you don't, people are going to leave. So the first way to take feedback is the debrief. You know, it's the thing we do at the end of every mission where we all sit in a TeamSpeak channel and I give some feedback, and then the ground elements go over what they did, and then there's an open section where anyone can speak up. In my opinion, the debrief is one of the most unique aspects of Arma 3 because, well, what other game do you play where you actually have a moment after the operation is done, or whatever you just played is done, where you can actually talk over everything with the people that made it, or the people that gave you the orders to do certain things. It's in itself just a giant learning experience where everyone can get better after they talk about things in hindsight, and hopefully both the player base and the mission maker can get better. However, this method of feedback does have some major drawbacks in the example of, let's say, ground command and a certain squad leader were not getting along in terms of orders, and now you're going to force them to try to talk to each other after the fact, and let's say the ground command got the squad leader killed after the squad leader was trying to backseat ground command. I've learned from experience trying to make those two people talk to each other in that situation, no matter the community, is an absolute pain in the butt, and they are going to let their personal biases muddy the waters, where if you try to ask them if they had fun in the operation, they're probably going to say no. So I would consider that to be one of the main drawbacks of a debrief, is because, you know, if you're looking directly in hindsight immediately after the fact, if players didn't have a good time over something, or they got crushed and they want someone to blame, that's going to definitely bias the feedback you get when you're trying to make sure your players are having fun in these operations and fine-tuning how you make things work. Hence why, in my opinion, the second method of giving feedback helps to kind of counter that issue, and that would be some sort of feedback channel, be it Discord or Google Form. This was actually an idea I picked up from the 89th, which was a Halo unit. At the end of every operation, they had a Discord channel where the mission maker would put out an at here to message everyone and just simply ask for feedback, where people rated the op on a scale of 1 to 10 and said their general ideas to the operation. Now, I've amended this in TSB to be purely for Zeus feedback because I felt that the debrief itself is where players should talk about what they liked and didn't like about their commanders. But I found that this is the best way to get feedback because you as the mission maker can control when you get it. So if tempers are flaring right after the op, you could probably wait, 30 minutes, give or take, for people to calm down or cool off until you make that feedback request. And then you can get some genuine feedback for your, mission or your Zeus, saying that you can then edit how you do things accordingly. Now, do understand there are drawbacks to having a feedback channel. Obviously, you can't expect everyone to actually give you feedback. Back to the Discord example, you only have 7 names here, but this was for a 25-person op. However, generally, if someone isn't willing to say their 2 cents in a debrief or a feedback forum, then, well, I hate to sound like this, but you shouldn't really have to go hunting down for their feedback. If people want to give you pointers, feel free. Otherwise, how can you really gear your mission to someone who isn't going to actually sit down and talk to you? But this transitions to the third method I consider for grabbing feedback, and that's directly talking to people or trying to get some one-on-one through, actually chatting with someone in particular. This is also a method of feedback I sometimes get if someone wants to tell me something anonymously, or if they want to talk to me specifically about how to do things. For example, recently I've been working on a Goose Green operation, and I've been trying to get some eyewitness accounts of various things in the placements of certain emplacements and how British tactics were utilized in that operation. I've actually found a few people that were willing to talk to me about that so I can make that operation to the best of my ability. I will also admit that there are some people's opinions for certain operations that I do care for more than other people's, especially if they're like the head honcho of a community. I want to make sure that, above all, they're someone that at least enjoys the op, because perhaps I want to consider Zeusing there. That's true across quite a few communities I've done some work for in the past. But regardless of how you get the feedback, as long as you are making sure that your players are enjoying your operations, that's what the #1 golden rule is about for Zeusing and mission making. However, I do have 2 extra things to say that I believe should tacked on to the player base should always have fun rule. Because these 2 amendments, I'm going to call them, have come up in various different places that I have seen across different communities, both as a mission maker and someone that's just playing on the ground. The first amendment is as follows. If you have to make the choice between making something more realistic and making something more fun, go with the fun. This is something I picked up by a man known as War Games Inc. over at the 506, and he runs helps run, one of the largest realism communities out there in Arma 3. And it makes a lot of sense, because I've been in plenty of communities where someone makes a really silly decision that, may make something more realistic, but at the same time it takes away from the fun. Now, originally I had some examples that put this amendment into perspective. However, after listening back to them, I've also kind of realized that the only people that can really make this decision are the people that are actively working in that community. That isn't always the people that are up top. Usually it's the most active players, but it's still the people at top that make these decisions, and that's where some community angst can occur. So instead, I'm going to give some general examples from what I've seen across multiple different communities. The most common realistic versus fun issue I see across these places is the balance of assets between infantry. In most communities, infantry take up a large portion of the player base, and therefore you should, as a mission maker, cater to that largest portion. I'm not saying you should completely disregard your support assets. Always give them something to do too, but if the support assets and the infantry have the same job, it's very easy for those support assets to do everything, and thus the infantry are just playing a walking simulator for 2 hours. Now, admittedly, that would be realistic if we were to quote the first Gulf War between the US coalition forces and the Iraqis. Most of the Iraqi forces would pull back before they even saw any US infantry, because coalition air support and armor would either kill or push back any Iraqi infantry. So the infantry to just do a walking simulator, while that is realistic, no one's gonna have fun in that. So, just something to keep in mind. If you're part of any major community, I'm sure you've seen these decisions made in the past, some good, some bad, but at the end of the day, it's just something to keep in mind as a mission creator, because you have full control of the mission file, unless you work with a community that forces a certain template, but there's still ways that you can balance things so that people at least have fun, even if it's in a realistic setting. And again, it's hard for me to speak on this topic because, we have full realism communities out there. We also have complete casual communities out there. So at the end of the day, they're the ones that have to make these decisions. I'm just saying, as a Zeus from a bunch of different places, please pick the player fun. Just make sure they have fun. No one wants to play walking simulator or driving simulator for 2 hours. I've been there. It's The second amendment I have is a little more of a personal one, in the sense that if you have a choice to make between the player base's fun and your own fun as an active Zeus or mission maker, even while building the file, please, for the love of God, choose the players. I say this is personal because, I'll be honest, my predecessor kind of fell apart because he neglected this fact. The same can be said for if you're a big famous streamer and you start valuing your viewer base's fun and making sure they enjoy your content rather than your player bases enjoying the operation that you're providing. And just saying it out loud's giving me goosebumps over what happened a few years ago. Other than that, guys, it's as simple as that. Golden rule number 1, make sure your players have fun, and make sure you communicate with them so you know what to give them that is fun. Now, I'll be honest, I'm really bad at making these types of videos, so if you have any tips and whatever, just please give them to me in the comment section. If you got something else to say, correcting me in the video or whatnot, feel free to bring it in the comment section. I actually read every single one, so yeah, I'll try to get these out when I can, but this took 3 weeks to make, and I'm, like I've already said, not really good at these. But on a final note, I will say that I did originally try to make a how to do convoys, you know, how to Zeus a convoy, and how to have your players ambush a convoy, and then how to ambush a player-based convoy, but I kept falling back on just simple theory and philosophy on, you know, how to be a good Zeus in general, and that's why I ended up making this video instead. I'm going to finish out this little series before I talk about anything concrete with the Zeus interface, with the mission Eden editor interface, and just my mindset behind when I do all that stuff, because I think it's important to understand where you should come from, or at least I try to come from when doing all of this, because otherwise I find that I then have to explain 20 different things, and I'd rather just, you know, make this series of videos just to kind of show you my mindset. But otherwise, guys, thank you so much for your... Jesus, this thing lasted like 20 minutes. It took 3 weeks to make. But otherwise, go operate operationally. Thank you so much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day or night, and I'll see you in the next little video.